So what is up, people? It is Friday, August 8th, and this is probably the first ever Friday edition of the MMA Ratings Podcast. This is episode 8. We've had it's been 2 weeks since the last show. It's been just a very hectic 2 weeks, because I do actually have a 9 to 5 real life, unfortunately, so I can't do this all the time every day. I wish I could, but I apologize for missing the show the last couple of weeks. Cerrone has been busy as well. So, yeah, we both apologize for not being here for you to talk MMA. But as always, we are brought to you by MMAratings.net, where you can go and rate the fights after every event. Just click on the stars, tell us how you really feel about whatever fight you just watched. And you can follow us on Twitter at MMARatingsNet. You can also follow us on Instagram under the same name. You can follow me on Twitter, where I talk about MMA, the NFL, pro wrestling, boxing, baseball, just about everything, at @RGarcia_sport. Are we talking about today? We have quite a few interesting topics to talk about, and we're also looking towards the UFC on Fox 21 card. That's tomorrow. We also have Bellator 160 tonight. So we have more than enough going on to keep us busy for the next hour or so. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. First thing I wanted to talk about was Rory MacDonald. MMA free agency always interests me. It's always because I've always been more interested in the business side of sports, and this is something that's developing in a way that I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen. Fighters are definitely being more open about their wanting for more power and more control of their career. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But certainly that is the case. So first and foremost, let's talk about Rory MacDonald. He recently signed a new deal with Bellator this week, and there's a couple of interesting points about that. Obviously, he was one of the top ranked UFC welterweights, coming off 2 very tough losses, one to Robbie Lawler and the other to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. 2 tough losses, 2 understandable losses. The division is getting very very heavy once again, like it was back in the heyday. So we are at a good point. We're at a pretty good point when it comes to the division. So I understand McDonald's last 2 losses. However, losing and going into free agency doesn't always work when you're looking to get the most money available, which brings up a couple of points. The UFC, first and foremost, they did not match the offer that Bellator brought his way. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't match it. It just means that they didn't. They waived their opportunity to match and allowed him to sign with the Viacom-owned organization. So maybe it means a couple of different things. Maybe, it's not. I'm not going to jump and say that they didn't value him. They didn't think that he was worth the money, but that's kind of what it comes down to. And that's kind of what it came down to when these situations come up. Athletes see this throughout every sport, where one moment they're the prize of the company, prize of the team, and next they can be an expendable asset. In this point in time, Rory MacDonald was the expendable asset, basically because they did not see the value of keeping him on the roster, especially after losing to Lawler twice and losing to the what many people can see as the current #1 contender. And I wouldn't be surprised if he asked for more money than they thought he was worth. Roy was very open in talking about his frustrations with what he was being paid. So when that happens, these athletes are asking for a larger piece of the pie, especially when you're seeing stories about McGregor and Diaz getting paid $2 and $3 million, or the UFC selling for $400 billion. These athletes are going to be paying attention to that. So that probably prompted MacDonald to ask for more money than the organization thought he was worth, and they decided to say no. So that opens up the door for him to now join Bellator, which he did. And there are a lot of interesting pieces to both of this. On one side, Bellator now has the last fighter who the last man to defeat the current UFC welterweight champion in Tyron Woodley. Remember, that was probably one of MacDonald's biggest wins when he basically owned Woodley for 3 rounds. Woodley couldn't do anything. Was stuck behind the jab, stuck circling around the cage with MacDonald just stalking him, popping him in the face. So they can definitely say that they have a fighter now who was the last man to defeat the current UFC champion. And then for MacDonald, he's going to be getting the money that he wants. He's getting a deal that is better for him. Details of the deal have not come out yet, but I'm sure that they were more to his liking than what the UFC offered. I would not be surprised. Same thing occurred with Vincent Henderson a few months back, and Josh Thompson before that. Matt Mitrione. So there is precedent for what we see. When we think about MacDonald in Bellator, the first question is usually going to be like, well, who do you want to see him fight? Obviously, people think of Bellator out on a lower scale because the talent is mostly in the UFC. But there are some names in Bellator that fans would want to see MacDonald face off against. I mean, obviously, MVP jumps off the page. Michael Venom Page, well, I didn't, that was an inadvertent pun, but Michael Venom Page has already began to lay that groundwork where he wants to get a fight against MacDonald. Then there's Douglas Lima, Paul Daly, Andrei Koreshkov. Vincent Henderson can go back up to 170. Lorenzo Larkin's a free agent now. We'll talk about him in a minute. But there are names out there where he can build to some very good fights within Bellator. But I personally think that, maybe he should just kind of do the Josh Thompson route. Josh Thompson's been beaten up on, I think he has a 3-fight win streak right now, as he's dispatched less than stellar competition, which, isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes these guys need to be built back up. You see Holly Holm stepping away from the spot, stepping away from the fight game for a little while just because of what she's been going through, riding a two-fight losing streak. So obviously, there's going to be a point in time where it's okay to fight lesser talent. So that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't think he should be thrown directly into a title shot like Vincent Henderson was. We saw how that worked out. He shouldn't be thrown into the deep end against a Koreshkov or against a Douglas Lima or against a Paul Daly. Let him fight on some cards against some lesser known talent and get some wins that help build him back up as a name. He's only 26 years old, but he's taken a lot of damage, especially over these last few years, getting in there with Bobby Lawler. So he's taken a lot of damage lately. I just don't think that it's smart to put him right back in there with guys who are headhunters or guys who are at the top of the ladder. So I'm not mad at this deal for MacDonald. I think this works out great for him and all of the parties involved. I think he's going to do well there. I think it's going to be a good deal for everybody involved. And speaking of Bellator, we're going to transition to Bellator 160, which is tonight. Looking at this card, there's only one fight that interests me, where you have Benson Henderson in the main event fighting against Patricky Fier for an opportunity to fight Michael Chandler for the Bellator title. I like how they did this. Again, it goes back to what I just mentioned. It gives Benson Henderson a fight that he should win and sets up a good title shot against Michael Chandler, who's basically the poster boy of the organization. I'm not mad at that move. I think it's a pretty good selection for both men. If Fier wins, it's a huge moment for him, because these guys can get knocked out at any moment. But I'm expecting Henderson to win, and I'm expecting him to set up an intriguing fight against Chandler. That's a fight I would love to see. A fight I will sit in and watch on a Friday night. So this is some good booking, good matchmaking by Bellator here, and this is again, this is the only fight from this evening's card that I'm interested in seeing. So let's go back to the UFC and talk about some of the other news bits and stories that have come out over the last week. Um, I'm so mad I put this down on the agenda for this week, but I guess the non-story of Ronda Rousey's non-return continues to come up. This week, it came out that one, she's not fighting at UFC 202, or excuse me, UFC 205 in New York, and then two, uh, UFC President Dana White mentioned that her return is going to be bigger than any fight that Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz have ever put on, which, I can agree with that. I think her return is going to have a massive impact within the sport. But I'm going to ask an even bigger question here. Is she really going to return to the sport? When I said it years ago that when she loses a fight, because everybody's going to lose a fight, I said this the second time she fought Miesha Tate. When she loses a fight, I believe she was going to step away from the sport and not come back. The same way Gina Carano did. While, yes, they are different athletes, with Rousey being a former Olympian who's battle tested. She's been in this game for a while now. She's carried the division. She's the reason why women are fighting in the UFC today. And I get it. I understand all that. However, I look at the opportunities that are probably looking her in the face outside of the MMA, and I would not be surprised if she hits her cart to those opportunities and just roll them off into the sunset. I mean, think about it. This woman was talking about suicide after losing the bantamweight title to Holly Holm. She was talking about getting pregnant with Travis Brown as a reason to want to stay alive, and those aren't the type of comments you want to hear from someone who is in this fight game and has stepped away from it for more than a year. I mean, it hasn't been a year yet, but by the time she gets back into the cage, it will be. And that brings up I always ask the question: how is someone going to look after a year away from the sport? It's so rare that guys are gone for so long and come back and look great. Yes, you do have those exceptions. Tyron Woodley came back after more than a year and knocked out Robbie Lawler. Fantastically correct. But those are the exceptions to the rule. So when I think about Rousey being gone for more than a year and she's going to be getting more opportunities her way, you have to wonder if she's really done. And I would love to see her back in the UFC. I would love to see her back in the cage, but the situation has to be right. I mean, headlining a card at Madison Square Garden, if that's not the time is right type of deal from a financial standpoint, I mean, because she was going to be the main event. Obviously, she was going to be well promoted. Pay-per-view points out the yin yang. So, what the heck? So, I mean, like, what is the there's a wealth of opportunity there, but I get it if she steps away to focus on the entertainment aspect of her career now, because that's there for her, and that was something I said. When she steps away from the sport, the same way that Gina Carano did, she's going to see more opportunities than she would have if she would have stayed within. And she's a much, much, much bigger star than Carano was when she walked away. So obviously these opportunities are going to be even more impactful and even more bigger than Gina has probably still has ever seen. So yeah, we're going to look and see if she comes back. I agree with Dana when he says that this is going to be the biggest event in UFC history. I totally see that happening, but I'm just concerned of if it will ever happen or not. I just don't think that is going to be the case. I just think that things are going to change, and she's not going to want to come back. So, and talking about fighting here, let's talk about the UFC on Fox 21, which is set for tomorrow night. Now, this card, the main card is awesome. Preliminaries, not so much, but that doesn't mean that people should turn away, because these next four fights I'm going to talk about are enough reason for you to want to sit down and watch this event here. Um, let's look at I'm gonna go from the top to bottom. I guess I'll go from the top to bottom. In the main event, we have Damian Maia and Carlos Condit. This is a very interesting fight here because the winner of this bout is probably going to be the man slated behind Stephen Thompson as the next contender at welterweight. On one side, you have probably the best MMA grappler in the sport today in Damian Maia. On the other side, you have the unpredictable Carlos Condit. I mean, he can throw whatever he wants to at you at any point in the game. And we often don't talk about how versatile he is in jiu-jitsu as well, too. So that is there for him. But let's break down this fight and let's look at how this might play out. On one side, we have Maia, someone who has blended wrestling and jiu-jitsu together in a way that is almost perfect for MMA. I think back to his fight with John Fitch. He controlled probably one of the best wrestlers in the sport at that time, like it was nothing. Immediately took him down, immediately took his back, and just worked him. He never didn't get the submission, but he continued to work him for probably 13 of that 15-minute fight. Matt Brown did the same thing with him. Immediately took him down, worked, controlled position. The one moment where he ended up on his back by accident in a scramble, he immediately got position back, took Brown's back, and eventually ended up choking him out. So again, Rick Story did the same thing with Rick Story. He ran into a snafu against Jake Shields. Jake Shields is probably one of the best. Jake Shields is a hell of a grappler. We're seeing that now, especially with his wins. He just submitted Lyoto Machida at Fight to Win last month, or this month, a couple weeks back. So, he's doing work out there in the grappling world. So that's an understandable tough match. I would love to see them face off in a jiu-jitsu match, just grappling wise, but that's another conversation for the day. Maia versus Condit. I'm intrigued with this fight here. It's a 5-round battle. We know that Maia has slowed down hell from the second round on. He did a good job of pacing himself against Matt Brown, but I think back to the fight against Rory MacDonald where Maia was winning. He won the first round. He won the early part of the second round, and then it just goes downhill from there. So as it's going downhill, that is what created an opening for MacDonald to take the win. That was the fight against Lawler for the title eliminator that came next, but it's still a moment that Maia could have set himself up for bigger and better things. So you have to wonder what the third, fourth, and fifth round will look like. I don't think that Condit is going to wait on his and kind of rest on his laurels to be aggressive and attack, but I still will not be surprised if he is conscious about his pace early on with the intention of allowing Maia to get the win that way. But if Damian's going to win this fight, it has to happen on the ground. I don't think he's going to submit Condit in any fashion, but I can see him getting takedowns and controlling for extended period of time. That's his route to win. Control, and he is someone that has the ability to do that. Will he do it? That's another question. I expect Condit to be very aggressive with his striking, and he's faced great grapplers in the past. I can think of guys like, Tyron Woodley is a great wrestler, but the way Carlos Condit blasted Dong Young Kim, someone else who's known for being able to take their opponent down and control for extended periods of time, Condit blasted him with that flying knee. So he's shown that he has an ability to get guys and get them in at their weakest point. So you got to wonder, how is this fight going to go down? I'm going to pick Condit by decision. I think he either gets a decision or a late stoppage, mostly based on how well Maya's cardio is working throughout the event. I just think that this is a fight that's not set up, but a fight that he should win. He's shown the ability to be able to control the pace, especially late in the fight. Think back to when he fought Nick Diaz. So this is the type of bout that he should win. I am certainly looking forward to it. I will be watching. But this is a true title eliminator here, and we'll see. I don't think one of these guys are going to leapfrog Damian Maia unless if it's leapfrog Stephen Thompson, unless if it's something amazing. But again, you never know with this sport, and you never know with how fights are made in the highest level of the UFC. The co-main event features Anthony Pettis dropping down to featherweight to face Charles Oliveira. This is obviously everyone's going to get on Pettis' bandwagon and say we're going to pick Pettis. He's going to win this fight, but I am not so certain. I'm going to pick Oliveira because Pettis has been looking very dry, very sunken out leading into this fight, and cutting down to 145 is a very drastic maneuver. He never looked huge at 55 or cutting down to 55, so I'm wondering what he's going to look like cutting 10 pounds on top of that. So there's that question. Then on top of that, Oliveira isn't a slouch in any way, shape, or form. He is very technical in his striking. This guy's grappling is scary. He does stuff that people thought you couldn't do in MMA. He does it, and he does it habitually. And he's looked tough. Think back to his fight against Frankie Edgar. Some people had that fight going one round apiece going into the third round, which was, you think about where Edgar's been since then, he might, other than Aldo, Oliveira is the only person to take a round off of Frankie since he dropped down to featherweight. So there's that. This guy is definitely not a cakewalk. He's someone that I would love to see win this fight. If he wins this fight, I expect him to be pushed to a position where he can begin to start demanding some bigger fights. But he's someone that I would love to see fight Conor McGregor as well too. That range, that height, and that grappling is something that is one hell of a combination that very few people have. So I'm looking forward to seeing this fight. Many people think, or there has been a lot of concern about Pettis, how he's looked in his last few fights, and I get that. I understand he has not looked great. Am I ready to write him off? Do I think he gets cut if he loses this fight? I don't think he gets cut. I think he has another opportunity at featherweight if he so chose. But I don't think he gets cut. I think that he has some serious rethinking to do because he just has not looked like that same guy who had one of the greatest fights of all time against Vincent Henderson. He didn't look like the same guy who looked invincible against a veteran like Gilbert Melendez. So we're not sure what we're going to get from him on Saturday, but this is a big fight for him. This is definitely a make or break situation, and I am not too I am not too keen on the idea of him cutting down to featherweight. This is going to give him a new life in his career. Hell, he's already making comments about going back up to 155 because he has business to take care of there. I don't know. Like, this is just not something I want to see right now at this point in time. I don't think he needed to be this drastic like he was at the end of the career. At the end of his career, like you see older guys do this, thinking that this would give them another shot. Think back to Lyoto Machida when he cut down to 185 from light heavyweight. But there are areas of his game that Pettis should have been growing within that could have seen him maybe take a year off from the sport, come back, and jump right back into the deep end of things to be able to get the job done at 155. But we're still in a situation where we don't know. We're going to find out on Saturday. But I'm going with I'm going with Charlie Dudo Bronx Oliveira as my pick. Next, we got Paige Van Zant and Beck Rollins. This is a big fight for Van Zant, not like a make it or break it type situation, but this is a big fight for her because she is coming back after her time on Dancing with the Stars. So this is a moment of exposure for her. This is a big moment of exposure for her because a lot of people are going to be watching to see how well she performs after her time away from the sport and doing something different that brought more attention to her. And if you listened to her comments a few days ago, where she wants to be making more money, I think that is something that people need to be paying attention to. I'm going to talk about this later on in the show, but the idea of these fighters are paying attention and wanting to be paid higher amounts for their services is very important. And to hear someone in her position coming off of a major opportunity, it's something that they need to be cognizant of because she's already making 40 and 40, which is more than what a lot of veterans are getting within the UFC. Now she wants more. Now she knows she's more valuable than that. And to prove her point, she needs to get this win over Beck Rollins, and she needs to get it in a dominant fashion, the same way she did, like let's say when she defeated what's her name? Felice Herrick. When she needs to look as dominant as she did in the later rounds of that fight tomorrow when she fights Rollins. Rollins is a tough veteran. She's been around for a little while. I think if Becky loses this fight, I think she's out of the UFC because she's had some tough times. But this is Van Zant's fight to lose, and she needs to be able to win this bout in order to back up her comments from earlier this week and her comments for just being a bigger star. The next fight I want to talk about is the main card opener with what was his name? Jim Miller and Joe Lozon. This is that rematch everybody wants to see. I'm sure everybody remembers the first fight. That was an absolute bloodbath where both of these guys went back and forth. and that was insane. I don't even remember what card that was on, but I remember that fight just in like a whole nother way. So now we have them rematching at a later point in their career, and while this fight doesn't have any title implications, it doesn't have any rankings implications. This is a legit enjoyment bout with two men who are going to get in there and they're going to go. They're going to go and they're going to like just straight try to blow the doors off of each other. And these type of fights excite me. I think that they're definitely fights for the fans and they're fights that people can get behind and just enjoy. I'm look I'm looking forward to seeing what goes down on when these two meet in the cage. And I mean, I'm looking at the fight. I saw some people who are pretty split. You have some picking Miller, some picking Lozon. I'm picking this fight based on just who am I a big fan of, and I'm definitely a bigger Lozon fan. So I'm hoping he gets the win, but it can go either way, especially if he goes in there and he gasses out early as he's done in the past. Miller is a veteran. They're both veterans actually, but Miller is too smart to let that happen. To play not excuse me. Miller is too smart to play into Lozon's game in some ways. So I'm looking forward to seeing what occurs. So we definitely have some other news bits to talk about this week. First and foremost, I want to double back on something I mentioned that Lorenz Larkin is a free agent. Because after he defeated Neil Magny at UFC 202, that was his last UFC contract bout, and he blew the doors off of Magny and like just completely blew the doors off of him in a way that I don't think a lot of people even really expected. I know I didn't. So seeing him win that fight was big because now he's a free agent and now he's looking to be paid. And if you saw his comments from earlier this week, I wrote a piece about it on Fansided. He basically wants to go to the promotion that's going to promote him the most. And right now, I don't know if that is the UFC because what happens is that he was before this fight he wasn't even ranked in the top 15. So even though he was 4-1 in the division. So you wonder, if he was just kind of, I don't want to use the term treading water, but he wasn't in a position to demand what he was worth. Now, with that win, he is in a better spot to demand what he's worth. And I know that a company like Bellator would love to have him. Will the UFC throw him some money? I'm sure that they will throw a deal his way. But the question will be whether or not the UFC will match. I think he ends up going back to the UFC, and he definitely and then he will be put in a position to get paid more. That's what I think. I think that they're going to offer him a bigger deal, but I think that deal is going to be bigger than what was expected before. I think that win over Magny and the way he got that win was just something that I guess was pretty big. It was definitely pretty big. It was something that I was kind of excited to see. So I'm looking forward to what's next for him as a fighter and whatever promotion he ends up in. So, what else are we looking at for the news stories this week? Obviously, Donald Cerrone also signed a new deal. I think he signed him and Carolina Kowalskiewicz. Her new deal came out today. But with Donald Cerrone, him and Carolina. Sorry about that long break there. But Donald Cerrone and Carolina Kowalskiewicz both signed new deals this week as well. Cerrone is an 8-fight deal. Kowalskiewicz is a 7-fight deal. And It's funny because there was a poll going around about with Cerrone, how long will it take him to get through 8 fights in the UFC? Now, I think they're going to try to slow him down. My pick was 2 years. I can see it going 3. I could see it going 3 years for him, but that is a big deal. Donald Cerrone is one of those guys who he had 1 fight left on his deal, and if he became a free agent, there was going to be money thrown his way. Kowalskiewicz, she wasn't done with her deal, but I think this definitely does lock her in. I think that proves to me, in my opinion, that she's the next individual for Joanna Jędrzejczyk to get for that women's strawweight title. But both of these individuals signed new deals this week, and what I think were pretty big moments. I got a question about fighters' pay and the fighter union later on, but I think that this is a big step because athletes are going like they want their money. They saw that UFC sold for $400 billion, and they want their money. And a lot of these guys, as they push women too, men and women, as they push their way to the top of the rankings, they're going to put themselves in a position to get that paper. And I think that this is kind of like we're starting to see that trend slowly moving in that direction where guys are going to start getting bigger deals, bigger and better deals that they're willing to sign. I already talked about Henderson versus Freire. Oh, another probably huge news bit I should have touched on earlier. GSP rumors are that he's going to be returning at UFC 206 in Vancouver. There ain't no opponent has been thought of yet. The news isn't actually official. This is the stuff that we're seeing across the internet. Um, yeah, my stance on GSP has not changed. I love him. I think he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. Hell, I may even argue that he is. Jon Jones is up there too, but still, that's another conversation for another day. But why come back? Why? He's 34, 35 maybe. Why come back and potentially tarnish your record, your legacy? You walked out of the sport on top. You walked out of the sport with an extremely tough win over Johnny Hendricks. Are your skills still the same? Are you going to be able to go in there and fight a Tyron Woodley, Robbie Lawler, Stephen Thompson at welterweight? You talked about fighting Michael Bisping at middleweight. Why do you get a middleweight title shot coming out of pseudo-retirement? I don't know. Do you put him back in there with Nick Diaz? That fight doesn't excite me. It doesn't excite me at all. So why come back? I mean, I don't know if this is a financial deal or if he's just, doing his thing. If he really has inspired back, awesome, fantastic, great. I love that. But I would love to see him to step away from the sport. Combat sports usually do not allow you to walk away under your own power, and GSP did that, and he did it in a way that no one else really has been able to. So while this announcement isn't official yet, still circulating, we'll have to see what happens because I am not too excited about the idea of him coming back at UFC 206. That's just my bare bones thoughts about it. I don't even know. Is he even a big star anymore? Is Canadian MMA in the same place as it was when he was here? We don't know. These are all questions we're going to find out, but I don't think that he is the guy, or he's he's not the guy anymore. He's not. And I don't know. A fight with Conor McGregor, okay, maybe. I'd watch that. Of course I would. But I'm not. I'm just not excited to see this guy come back. I just hope it's done the right way, and I hope he doesn't tarnish his legacy that he worked hard to build. So I got a couple of questions before we close out the show today. The first question is the fighter union for real? And I think so. Jeff Boris is the guy who's kind of leading the charge, and he's represented a lot of big names across sports. Like, that's the thing that makes this the most interesting to me. This reaches across sports. It's not just about some MMA agents who aren't really businessmen or aren't really sports agents or whatever, who aren't sports business agents stepping up and making the charge. No, this is a guy who's done deals for, let's see, this guy has done deals for, let's look at some of his agents. He's done his notable clients include Barry Bonds, Jose Canseco, Ricky Henderson, Bobby Bonilla, but I can never say that guy's name to save my life. Kurt Schilling, Tammy Lincecum, one of my favorite baseball players, Hunter Pence, Mark Reynolds, my favorite baseball player, Dan Uggla. So if he's really going to, obviously there's opportunity in this for him. That's why he's decided to do it. But I think this is going to be a big deal. Conor McGregor has already begun talking about it. He recognizes the need for it, but he's also said, this is not the time for him. Someone's going to have to be a martyr for their career. And he's actually made those comments. So this is a story that's worth watching. I think this is for real, and I think that this is something that is going to impact the sport probably in the next couple of years. Not right out the gate, but next couple of years. Is UFC 202 the biggest event in history? News broke this week that UFC 202 shattered the $1 million pay-per-view buy spot, which I'm not too surprised. This was well promoted. It was a big event. It was a great card too, by the way. Like, the flow of it, the action, the knockouts, the finishes. This was a great card from top to bottom. Even though it didn't feature a whole bunch of big giant names, just the flow of it, man, it was boom, 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 boom. Worked perfectly. And I wish that all UFC cards can work like that, especially these Fox cards that are just like 8 hours long, 7 hours long, just ridiculous. But it was a great event, and I think it'll probably be going down as the biggest event in history. So with that in mind, again, we have a lot of MMA going on tonight, going on tomorrow. You can check back for episode 9 of the MMA Ratings Podcast next Wednesday. We will be back on Wednesday talking about the sport, me and Cerrone. You can follow me at rgarcia_sports. You can catch us at MMAratings.net. Go there, rank the fights you watch tonight, rank the fights you watch tomorrow, and just catch us next week. We appreciate you guys for listening to the show, and have a great weekend.